Welcome to Craft Chat Chronicles, the go-to podcast for tips on crafting best-selling fiction. Here at Craft Chat Chronicles, we bring you expert interviews, insights, and tips on writing, publishing, and marketing.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 3 of Craft Chat Chronicles. Today we'll be talking to a woman who was number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list. That's author Ava Reid. She'll give us tips on writing a best-selling dark academia novel and discuss her writing and publishing journey and a lot more. Stay tuned. Things have been going good for you, bestsellers list and all.
Yeah, it's been a big surprise, honestly.
Exciting. How are you liking being a published author?
It's good. It's good. It's more like it's more emotionally complex than I expected it to be. I think it's just like, with my 2 previous books, like they didn't flop or anything like horrible like that, but they didn't get this kind of level of attention. So it's just hearing so many people's opinions and being exposed to so many people's opinions, even if they're good opinions, it's just like information overload to the point where I'm like, I need to just stop looking at like any tagged posts and stuff like that. Because again, even if it's positive, I'm like, this is just making me feel too many things. So.
Okay, cool. You like in California? I know you recently moved there.
I've been here since 2018, actually. Yeah, but I'm from New York, so very, very different.
Okay. So I'll dive in now.
Okay.
What do you believe are the essential elements needed to capture a reader's attention on the first page?
I have a friend, Victoria Lee, who this was advice about a query, but I think it kind of applies to a first page too, is you basically need an interesting character in an interesting world with an interesting problem. And I think that if you can kind of capture all of those 3 things on the first page, which, can be difficult, but I think if you can capture all those 3 things, then that's a very effective opening.
Did you have any surprises during your publishing?
So many surprises, probably too many to count. I think the biggest surprise was just how long the process ultimately takes. I mean, I sold A Study in Drowning in early 2020, late 2020, early 2021, and then it came out in fall of 2023. So it was definitely like a very long process of, getting through the edits and production and so many people, having their hands on the book, not just your editors and the copy editors, but like marketing and sales and, getting all of that kind of feedback. It's so involved and it takes so long, which was, I think I was prepared for that a little bit, but I wasn't fully prepared for the extent of it.
So how did the reality of being a published author differ from what you fantasized about it when you were a young girl or when you were...
I mean, I think when I was younger, I'm like zillennial, like kind of right on that cusp. So like I did grow up with the internet, but not at all the way that it is now. So I thought of writing always as like a pretty anonymous thing. I mean, I got my start on like fanfiction.net writing like Warrior Cats fanfiction, which like, I'm just doing that anonymously behind an account. But that's not really like realistic. You can't really have that level of anonymity as an author anymore. I mean, unless you're like Otessa Moshfegh. So I really didn't know when I was younger that it would there would be this level of like scrutiny about me not just my works. Like I saw someone made a Wikipedia page for me the other day. Like literally my husband came in the room, he was like, "Oh no, you're not gonna like this." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "You have a Wikipedia page now." And I'm like, "Oh my God." With a bunch of incorrect information, mind you. I don't know who put it together, but a bunch of stuff is wrong. So yeah, I didn't anticipate having to be so present as a person, in addition to just kind of sharing my work.
How does that feel?
I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? And I think most authors will probably say the same thing. Like, getting to connect directly with readers can be really, really great. And to just hear that and know that your work has touched people in all these different ways. And then, obviously, there's the double-edged sword of that, which is people just having a lot of access to you and kind of demanding your opinions and your takes and your identity to kind of justify the things that you're writing about. And I think especially now, the readers kind of want that more than ever. They want to know, how your identity kind of connects to your work. And most people, I don't think, mean it in like a hostile way or anything, but I think the impact can be that it feels very intrusive sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I get it. I think for most people, it's wanting to see themselves reflected. So they want to hear that, you identify with this or that so they can bond with that. But at the same time, we all have chapters of our life we don't want read out loud. Some things are personal.
Yeah. And I think that, again, a lot of it comes from a good place. So I try not to be like completely dismissive of it, but at the same time, it's like, if I'm writing about like mental illness and abuse and stuff, I think you can trust that like this is something that I've been through without me having to elucidate all of these details.
And it's something that touches almost all of us, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
What is your process for creating complex characters?
So I'm like a thematic writer. So the first thing that kind of comes to me for a book idea isn't necessarily the what of the book, but the why of the book, if that makes sense. So like, why do I want to tell this story? What do I want to communicate? What is kind of the central theme or central idea that I want to explore? And then I see everything from even, the characters to the prose style to the plot as being reflective of that theme. So it all kind of comes from that. And the idea in A Study in Drowning that I wanted to explore was this idea of stories and, your heroes failing you and what makes a story true or real or resonant, and who gets to tell these stories and who is believed when they do. So then, the characters kind of all sprang from that, and they all kind of reflect those themes in a different way.
I love that. What do you think makes a good protagonist?
So for me, what makes a good protagonist is being a little bit like unhinged and weird. And I think anyone who's read my books will kind of see that that's the case. Some of my like favorite protagonists are like, I think I literally have this in my Instagram bio, like Mary Cat Blackwood from We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I think she's such an incredible protagonist. I love being in her head. Like, she's so strange and such a like interesting character to follow, and the way that she sees the world is just like so trippy and fascinating. And in A Study in Drowning, Effie, the main character, is a very, very unreliable narrator. She literally, struggles with these hallucinations, these delusions. And that's, to me, I know that a lot of people won't agree, but like those are the most interesting characters to me. Kind of a hallmark of the Gothic genre is having these unreliable narrators and being immersed in the mind of someone you can't necessarily fully trust. And that's always really interesting to me.
I love that. What other elements do you think are essential to a good Gothic novel?
I mean, obviously, atmosphere is a big one. This kind of claustrophobic setting where, the setting is kind of a character. Those are all, very typical, expressions of and themes of kind of the ugly underbelly of domestic life. A lot class often comes into it. I think that's a very essential theme. I think also prose style, that's something that kind of I think gets overlooked when we're having this Gothic Renaissance. But like to me, this very Baroque and detailed prose style is like essential to a Gothic novel, or at least a Gothic novel that I'm gonna enjoy. I really do like the heavily stylized, like melodrama of the Gothic style, and that feels essential to me.
Love that. What makes a good villain in your Gothic novels?
I mean, it's funny because the Gothic genre gives actually a very good kind of archetype of a villain, and usually it's kind of this mysterious and sinister, like master of the house that usually represents like kind of like the old ways, and in this tradition where we're talking about like the erosion of aristocratic power, he usually kind of represents the clinging to this kind of old outmoded way of life, and I think that is kind of that's there in both of my Gothic novels. The villains really represent that, and I think that's maybe not necessarily essential, but that's kind of the classic Gothic archetype of a villain.
Tell me a little bit about your publishing journey. I'm going to go back to craft too. I'm jumping around a bit.
No worries. So I mean, I've wanted to be a writer, I think, since I was, again, like 11 years old on the Warrior Cats fan fiction forums, doing my little role plays. But I didn't start like kind of seriously working to get published until like 2018. I just graduated college, and I was working at this startup because I live in Silicon Valley. I was working at this AI robotics startup, which was very interesting. And I was just writing and trying to finish my first novel. And then I got into this pitching contest, like mentorship program, which actually doesn't exist anymore. But when it did, it was like a pretty big deal, and a lot of famous books came out of it. So I got in, and I was mentored by this amazing author, and she kind of like showed me the ropes and, got my book in front of agents. And that's how I found my first agent, got my first publishing deal in 2018. And that part happened pretty quickly. And then, now it's like 6 years later, and we're 3 novels in. So it's definitely a protracted process. But before I, wrote what would become my debut, I wrote so many other books that, will never see the light of day. And I kind of queried them on and off, but never really, I didn't really understand like what the querying process was like. And I basically just like didn't really know what I was doing. So that was never going to be successful. But it was kind of this mentorship program that I was in that started it all.
Cool. What advice would you have for other writers who are just now in the midst of the querying process and who are where you were then?
I'm always like hesitant to give advice about this because querying has changed a lot since I last queried, again, like almost 6 years ago now, and I like the kind of landscape is very different. But I'll refer back to my friend Victoria's advice about how your query needs to have an interesting character and an interesting world with an interesting problem. Another thing is definitely you have to be like reading and know what's selling in your genre. Like I think a lot of agents say that they get queries that are just like your comp title is like Harry Potter and like Blood Meridian, and it's like this is not like this is not what's being published right now. Like you need to be reading, new releases and keeping up with what publishers are actually buying. And instead of, comp books that are from, 2 decades ago.
What were your literary influences?
Oh, a lot. I mean, I draw a lot from the Gothic genre. I collect copies of We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I love all of her work so much. The classic Gothic authors like Mary Shelley, Gormenghast is another book that's been a big influence on me. I also really love kind of the tradition of fabulism, like the books of Karen Russell have been really. I remember I picked up her first short story collection from a used bookstore when I was like 19, and I'd been like on a kind of like drought of inspiration in both reading and writing, and I picked up that book because the title was awesome. The title is St. Lucy's Home for Girls Raised by Wolves. And I read it, and it was kind of the book where I was like, oh, reading is fun and like style, like prose style is just as essential as content. And I think that was the book that kind of made me really think that and care so much about style. So that and Kelly Link and Helen Oyeyemi are other authors in that tradition who I really, really love and draw a lot from.
Hey, JD Mile here. Thanks for supporting the show. Today's episode was brought to you by my debut novel, Heart's Gambit, coming to bookstores in February of 2026. 2 time-traveling Black families, 1 cursed magical duel, and the pair of star-crossed lovers who just might break the cycle if they don't break each other first. If you like the love and time travel of Outlander mixed with the magic of the night circus, don't worry, Heart's Gambit is coming soon. In the meantime, please support today's guest by running out and buying their book. Thanks for supporting the show. Now, let's get chatty as Craft Chat Chronicles continues. So you mentioned a minute ago about how, people need to be aware of what's selling. From your perspective, what do you think is hot right now? What do you think is selling?
I mean, I can only speak to the genres that I write in, so, SFF and YA, but I mean, romantasy is the big thing right now. That's pretty much almost exclusively what I think SFF publishers are interested in buying, if not, kind of romantasy, at least books with a strong romantic subplot, because that's what Book Talk wants to read. For better or for worse, I think dark academia is a big trend right now. I think we're going to see a big renaissance of dystopia because of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and we're seeing a kind of renewed interest in that. Yeah, I can't necessarily speak to other genres, but that's what I'm seeing in the genres that I write in.
So you talked about romantasy. Do you have any advice for creating a good romantic subplot or adding romance to your novel?
I don't know. I like all my books do have romance, but I've never really considered myself to be like a writer of romance. Like, I remember when I was revising my first novel, which has a romantic subplot, but that's not really the main plot of the book. And I was getting feedback from my editor about kind of like strengthening the romantic subplot. And I was like, I don't even know how to do this. And I went to my friend, Allison Saft, and I was like, who writes romance, who writes really, really amazing romance. And I was like, how do I do this? And she was like, well, what is like the first, she was like going to talk me through it like I was a small child. And she was like, so what is the first moment when like they realize they're attracted to each other? And I was like, I don't know. Like I wasn't even thinking about these things while I'm writing. So yeah, I'm not sure I have much good advice about that, but I think that the best romances to me are the ones where the characters find something in the other that they can't find in anyone else, and where their kind of wounds are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, I don't think this is my forte as an author necessarily,
That
but
was really good, though. I haven't heard that before. Do you have any tips for making the beginning of your story exciting? Keeping readers engaged, basically.
yeah. Again, I feel like I'm not the best equipped answers because I feel like every single book I write, the feedback I get is like the opening is too slow and we need to get to the action sooner. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that readers want to feel like, or I as a reader want to feel like you're kind of in competent hands and that the author has kind of a strong vision and you can trust that that they're gonna take you there, if that makes sense.
It does.
Books that I tend to lose interest in are the ones where it feels like the author is just kind of doing whatever's easier for them, having a strong vision for, what they want for the book and being like in control of all aspects of their craft, prose style, characters, plotting intention.
How do you avoid the saggy middle?
I'm not really much of an outliner at all, but I try to follow the Save the Cat beat sheet, which is, I think, like a resource that pretty much every author loves and refers to a lot, but it basically gives you all of these, kind of plot beats to follow to make sure that, you don't lose tension and you keep your readers engaged. And I think that's a super helpful resource for any author. And obviously you can deviate from that a bit, but I think that's like a great starting point if you're just, starting to kind of map out the plot of your book.
Love that. Any advice for making the ends compelling and tying things up?
See, I am someone who actually is okay with endings that are a bit open-ended and still having questions. It's funny, my editor tried like 2 or 3 times to get me to change the ending of A Study in Drowning because she thought it was like too open-ended. But I don't know. I've always really enjoyed endings where like you still have some lingering questions and it kind of makes you want to like reread the book and like see if there's, stuff that you missed or stuff that you're only going to get, in a second read through. And, maybe consider that you don't need to, wrap everything up neatly with a bow, and some ambiguity is okay. Again, as long as you're kind of in control of that, and that's an active choice that you're making, as opposed to just saying, "Oh, I'm going to leave this, not tied up just because it's like easier, and I don't want to deal with it."
I love that.
Makes sense. It's just my process is like extremely chaotic, so I'm trying my best to like not make it sound that way.
You're doing a great job. How did you get the news that you made the bestseller list, and how did you celebrate?
Oh my gosh. So I think again, every author experiences this like stressful, tense week between your release and when the bestseller list comes out, which is at California time. It's 4 p.m. on Wednesday. So I was just a complete ball of stress like the entire week, and it was horrible on Tuesday and Wednesday because like I'd heard from some people that like, oh, publishers get the list ahead of time, so ahead of time. And then my agent was like, no, that's not true. And I was like, wow, but like, what if it is? And then like, no one's telling me because I didn't make the list. Well, it was actually horrible. I was so stressed out. And then on Wednesday, again, I was just a ball of stress the entire time. And I told my agent because New York Times subscribers do get the list sent to them, like just, usually a couple hours ahead of time. And I told my agent to just call me if it happened. And I was just like sitting there right at this desk. I was just like sitting there like literally waiting as the time ticked down, waiting for the call. And she called me and I was like, did it happen? And she was like, yeah. And she was like, it's number one. Yeah. And I just like burst into tears, I think. And it was just amazing to get the news from my agent too, because she's like the most important person in my kind of publishing career. And like, we've been together forever and she's just so supportive and I love her so much. So it just felt really special to get the news from her specifically.
Who's your agent?
Yeah. Sarah Landis at Sterling Lord. I love her so much. If anyone is like looking for someone to query, 100,000% recommend her. I think anyone would be so lucky to be represented by her.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of my like, success as an author is owed to her. Yeah.
What makes that author agent or any author agent relationship work from your perspective?
I think so. Most people, I think when they're queer, understandably, they focus on, just the sale and they just want their book to sell, which again, very reasonable request from an agent is sell my book. But what's just as important is having that support after the sale. And Sarah is actually my second agent. And my first agent was the one who got me my book deal, but then she was just kind of like ghosted me basically after she sold it. Like she was just not interested in kind of helping me deal with everything that came after. And like, that is the really important part, is your agent, kind of holding your hand through all this and being able to tell you, okay, this is a normal part of the process, or like, no, your publisher is like screwing you over. We need to like talk to them because, again, this happens a lot as an author. You basically have no bargaining power with your publisher, which is very cool. So your agent is the one who's basically your advocate to your publisher, and they're the person who kind of has their finger on the button telling you, my agent is always the one that I will send a pitch to or send, parts of what the book I'm working on and be like, do you think this is something I should pursue? Like, do you think this is the right step for my career? Do you think that this will work in the market? So she's the one who I kind of trust on that. And just like genuine emotional support. She's talked me off the ledge like more times than I can count when, just stuff in publishing it just really gets to you. So yeah, I think that, excuse me, your agent is like 100% the most important person in your publishing journey.
That's awesome. A lot of writers complain about not feeling like they've had a lot of support in the marketing and stuff side.
Yeah.
You experienced that, or were all of your books very well marketed?
Oh my God, where to even begin? This is like, oh my gosh. So I don't know how much of this you want to use, but for A Study in Drowning, I think the biggest single indicator of how much marketing support you'll get for your book is usually the advance amount. I mean, that's quite literally your publisher communicating to you how much they think your book is worth. And based on the advance amount I got for A Study in Drowning, and I sold A Study in Drowning before my first book had even come out, so I had no sales record. So, I didn't expect to be like, giant, splashy auction, whatever. And based on the advance amount, I knew that it would be kind of a mid-list title. I knew it wasn't going to be the lead title for the season or whatever. A lead title is just like the one book per publishing season that the publisher tends to focus the most on and make the biggest deal about. So I knew that that wasn't, going to be A Study in Drowning, and that it was kind of this weird book. It isn't like super high concept. So I did know that going in, but I was still pretty surprised by how, let's just say, hands off my publisher was. I mean, they told me that as a cost cutting measure, they were not doing physical arcs, which are just arcs, are just advanced copies of the book that you send out to, readers and reviewers to build hype and suspense. And that's one of the most important marketing tools for a book. And they were just like, we're not doing that. So I just didn't have those. And they ran like one paid ad, I think, and like did like one Goodreads giveaway like the week of release for like 5 copies. So I was keeping track of kind of these early indicators, Amazon ranking, Barnes and Noble ranking, social media statistics, and I ended up sending over to Harper just a document with all of these early indicators. And I was like, hey, I think that people are really like interested in this book, and like maybe you should take that into account.
That was brilliant, by the way.
Yeah, and they did end up raising the marketing budget for the book. I'm not sure by how much, but it did get them to pay a little more attention. Again, I don't think that's something authors should have to do, because like the whole point of traditional publishing is that your publisher is supposed to take care of all of that. But again, it's like this era of social media is a double-edged sword, because you actually can,
you can see in real time what's happening.
And because you can, despite the capricious nature of the algorithm and stuff, you can move the needle on your own as an author. And that was like something that was really essential to, I think, A Study in Drowning's success. I mean, this was kind of definitionally like a word of mouth kind of success, where people just read it and then they told people that they liked it. It didn't have this giant marketing campaign behind it. It didn't even have physical arcs. But I think it's a testament to just the power of readers. And it's been kind of amazing for this to be the book that's been so successful, is the one that was, a word of mouth success, the one that kind of no one in my publisher expected to be big, that I didn't necessarily expect to be big. And I will never take that for granted, and I'll never not feel grateful that the book ended up resonating with so many people who just wanted to talk about it.
That's exciting, fun, and good experience. Purely selfish question, because I just sold a book. What?
Oh my God! Congratulations! That's amazing.
What's
your
debut?
about?
It's a YA fantasy romantasy book. It's these time traveling people. It's billed as like the Night Circus meets Outlander.
Ooh, that's so cool. What? So that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. So what can I expect? What's debut year look like?
I don't know. Do you know when it's releasing?
It was a 2 big deal. So one is 2025 and one is 2026.
Okay, so you've got some time. Yeah, that's awesome. Sorry, what was your question? I got distracted.
What's debut year like? What can I expect? What are the challenges, the pitfalls, the fun parts?
I think one of the biggest pitfalls that kind of really gets people is just the comparison with other books and other debuts, and like that can kind of be like the harbinger of doom for a lot of people, is just this constant need to compare to other people. And it is really hard to not view other authors as your competition, because like in some sense this is sort of a zero-sum game. If someone else gets that book deal, it means that you don't get that book deal. So that I think is really something that I would recommend. And it's inevitable, like you'll feel those emotions inevitably, but I think the most important thing is to just kind of find your little group and your people people that you trust, people who are going through similar things. Having those friends and those connections was so essential for me, and just like keeping my sanity during debut year. And also, it's not everything. I mean, my debut was fine. It did okay. I mean, it wasn't like, again, this big splashy thing. Studying Drowning is my third book. So it's definite. And I have so many friends who are on, their fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh books. And that was the one that popped off. Becca Ross, who's been writing, like, I've loved her books forever. She's just been consistently putting out just amazing, amazing books. And I feel like she's finally getting getting recognition for it, which is awesome. And this is her seventh book. So yeah, just remember that it's not everything, and it's not like your one chance. And if you blow that, it's like your career is over. That's definitely not true. Even though that narrative is like very heavily pushed. But yeah.
That's encouraging. Thank you. What message would you like to give, just in general, like any closing thoughts for readers, for fans, for aspiring readers, for anybody?
I think all writing advice at this point is kind of a cliche, which is fine. But I think my kind of favorite piece of writing advice, or the one that resonates with me the most, is just to write the story that only you can write. And the one that feels the most real and true and honest to you, something that you're proud of, because this is a really, really emotionally taxing experience, and it's a really tough industry, and you're going to have to fight really hard for your book and for your vision, and you're going to spend years and years working on this book, and you're going to have to, again, defend it to people and deal with criticism. So if it's not truly like a project from your heart, I think you're going to find that very difficult. And I think the difficult moments of publishing, all the many, many times where it's just like, I wanted to give up. It was that, that idea of my book is something that was really important to me, that kind of kept me going.
What are you working on now?
I actually just got my line edits for my next YA project, which is coming out in 2025, I believe in the winter of 2025. So I will be working on that.
That's exciting. Where can people connect with you?
So mostly on Instagram. It's just at Ava S. Reid. I do have a TikTok. I'm really bad about using it. It's also at Ava S. Reid. I'll trying to make a concerted effort in 2024 to post on that more regularly, but my main platform is Instagram. And I also have a terribly, terribly outdated author website, but that's also avasreid.com. Don't be like me if you're an author. Update your author website regularly.
Well, you were a joy to talk to and interview, and I wish you continued success. You don't need my little wishes, though. You're already flying.
No, I appreciate it. That's another thing about this industry, is things can change very, very quickly. Perfect.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your patience.
Of course. This is great. I hope you're feeling okay. Your doctor's appointment.
I got hit by a car a lot.
That's awful. I hope you feel better soon, Jesus.
It's like everything happens at once. First, I got like the book deal, and I was excited because that's going to go forever. So I was like, yes, a dream come true. Then got hit by a car, like literally. I was like,
I'm so sorry for laughing, but that's like
hysterical. It's like, what is fate doing? So yeah.
Well, that's going to be a great story, when you're doing interviews like this and people ask you, like, what was your, like, book publishing experience like? And you're like, well, I got my book deal, then I got hit by a car.
But again, thank you so much. And you have a wonderful day. I appreciate you.
Of course. You too. Feel better.
Thank you. Bye. Nice meeting you.
I hope you enjoyed our chat with Ava Reid today. You can find Ava's books wherever books are sold. And now, for those of you who are curious, I figured I'd end episode 3 by giving you a little bit of background and history on myself and my publishing journey. Hope you enjoy. Okay. So my publishing journey. My publishing journey was kind of like a twisty, turny one. I always loved to read my entire life. I was the odd kid that would read a 300-page book in a day. I loved really all kind of books. One of my favorite books was Kindred by Octavia Butler. I used to read a lot of B.C. Andrews, Stephen King, Anne Rice. When I was really young, I liked books like Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. I was obsessed with The Outsider at one point. When I was young, I think I read that book like 32 times, and I memorized the first page. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only 2 things on my mind, Paul Newman and a ride home. I could go on, but I just further embarrassed myself. So I was always a book nerd, always loved writing, was a really strong short story and poetry writer. And my first attempt at writing a novel was really bad. But oddly, like the very first time I attempted to write a novel, a lot of the plot elements were similar to the movie Soul Food, which was really odd because I was super young at the time and I was just writing and being creative. And then I went to the movie and I saw it and I was like, wow, somebody did that already. They did it so much better than my little young attempt to do it. Then I was an Army brat, so I moved around a lot. And again, books were my best friend. I was raised as an only child. My brother wasn't born until years later. And I have a sister, but we weren't raised in the same home. We have different mothers. So I didn't meet her till way later. So yeah, I was an Army brat. I loved to read. I loved books. I was a little odd and quirky. Still a little odd and a little quirky. And I just always read, always wrote. I decided I wanted to attempt to do it professionally pretty much after I got divorced. I was a single mom with kids, 2 of whom are autistic and on the spectrum. 4 kids, so divorced, 4 kids. And was just really trying to process a lot of what I've been through and just trying to get back in touch with my creative side and my writing. I did photography and stuff too. So I was just really trying to reconnect with the parts of myself that I lost during that toxic and abusive relationship and got back into writing again. And the first thing I wrote was, again, really bad because while I had great skill at short stories and I was, pretty strong at poetry, my plots would fall apart in a longer narrative. Short stories and actual novels are very different. I didn't know anything about writing craft, but I definitely had a lot of belief in myself, even though I didn't have the ability to back it up yet. So I sent it to the book I've written to be professionally edited this time. I was like, oh, I'm really taking this seriously now. I'm going to get an editor. I'm going to do the things I think professional writers should do. And this editor was basically like, she was a really good lady. She could have just took my money, even though the project was nowhere near ready for that. But she was like, sweetie, you need to learn storycraft. You need to get better at plotting. And she was right. I needed beta readers to look at it to help me identify the things that were working, the things that were not. It didn't make sense to pay, for example, it didn't make sense to pay for edits on parts of a novel that should be cut because they weren't serving the story. So, but she put me on to learning about craft and recommended some craft books. And I absolutely adore and love craft, from like Donald Moss's book, The Emotional Craft of Fiction, to The Breakout Novelist, and Bird by Bird, and Stephen King's On Writing. Pretty much, if it's a craft book and they make it, I probably read it multiple times and taught everyone who was open to hear about writing craft and fiction writing, because it was a passion of mine. I wanted to improve every day and study every day, and I do, and practice and better myself at writing. And what that particular editor doesn't know was I kind of had a little bit of a litmus test for myself. My current novel, the one that I sold recently, it's currently called Heart's Gambit. I don't know if the editors will change the title. If they do, I will update with the current title. But it's kind of like described as like Outlander meets the Night Circus. It's these magical Black time traveling families that have had this feud that's kind of been ongoing. And basically, the spell that gave them their power is also cursed them into this magical feud, and they time travel. It just has really all these really cool elements of it and stuff. And what that editor doesn't know is, because for my own little personal litmus test, when I was workshopping that story and I was sending it to my beta readers, I sent a couple chapters to that editor, like anonymously, totally different name, just to see how she'd respond. And the response this time was like, wow, this is really good. This is publishable. You need to keep working on this. And I was like, my own little personal private victory. And she had no idea it was me. She had no idea it was the same writer. She probably doesn't even remember, years ago how she told me I wasn't ready and I needed to work on my craft. But for me, that was a celebration moment. So like I said, I was writing. Early on in my career, I wrote, like most professional writers, a couple bad books. We all have our books in the nightstand or on the hard drive that didn't really go anywhere because we weren't ready yet. Writing is a journey. You need to constantly be practicing and learning craft and building your skills. So when the moment comes, you're ready to meet it. But I did believe in myself. Like I said, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'm sorry. I'll get back to the origin story. So I had sent that not so great novel to an editor, and her feedback was working in craft, and I worked on it a little, but I still wasn't there yet at that time. But I totally believed in myself, even though the belief in myself shouldn't have been there yet. So, though I was a single mom, though, money wasn't like awesome at the time because I was just on the heels of a divorce, I wanted to support my dream and my desire to be a writer and my ambitions. So I got a publicist. I decided I was going to self-publish this terrible book, after querying this terrible book unsuccessfully. So and again, this is not the book that I'm coming out with. This isn't the book that sold. This is earlier in my writing career. So I queried this horrible book, and naturally everyone said no. Thank God they said no, because I really wouldn't want that book to be my introduction to the world, because I think I'm way better than that now, and I'd truly be embarrassed if that was how you met me. So I queried people. They were like, no, thank you. No. So then after that, I decided, well, I'll self-publish it. I'll do it myself. I got the interior laid out, formatting, cover designer, all this stuff. All of them, most of the people who did these services for me were aspiring as well. So, some of the services looked like they were aspiring people too. But shout out to the entrepreneurship. That's a good spirit to have. We all have to start somewhere. It's how we learn and how we grow. So from that point, I put this book in the universe. I hired a publicist, and she represented me for a very brief time because my budget was very small. But she told me, she's like, you can't really afford to keep paying a publicist for this. But if you keep, working on your writing or you blog for different sites and stuff, they'll have to have your bio in the bottom, and that'll help promote your work because you can link to your website. And then that links to your books and stuff. So I was like, awesome. And then that's what I did. And that was how I originally started with Ms. Magazine and stuff like that. Originally, I would pitch to blogs or magazines, and it was crickets. People weren't really overly interested in just me as a person. I was a little nobody never heard of. But something I learned from Timmy Newhouse, For those of you who don't know, Tamika Newhouse does the AAMBC Literary Awards in Atlanta. And I volunteered there for years and would help her out, ran her writing staff for her earlier on, did everything from packing up the gift bags to eventually working my way up to being on her board. And one thing I learned from her was, she always had her name in the conversation with bigger names, which is a great promotional tool. She does her awards every year and it highlights great authors. But in doing so, people also learn about her because she's, the one putting on this event. So then I thought, well, maybe that's a good idea. So while I was there volunteering, I'd be interviewing the nominees and I'd be pitching these interviews to Writer's Digest, Miggs Magazine, and all these different publications. And it helped Tamika because it's getting publicity for her event. It helped me because the publications who might not have been as interested in just hearing from me at that point in my career were interested in hearing from people like Nikki Giovanni and hearing from these published writers with bigger names than mine. So that helped me get my earliest interviews. And then once I had a track record with Writer's Digest and Ms. Magazine and Huffington Post and other publications, then I could get interviews on my own. I didn't have to just, rely on the attendees of the awards and stuff like that. But doing that, like I said, started putting the name out, started promoting that really terrible book that I'm now so ashamed of that I try to buy every existing copy and I took it down. So those of you that are curious, hopefully will never get your hands on one because it's embarrassing. But anyway, so like I said, so then I that was in the universe. And through interviewing, I made some of the connections that led me to get my book deal and my deal with my agent and stuff like that. But it wasn't an overnight path. I went to Drexel and got my MFA, continued to study craft. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Drexel MFA Alumni Association. I've been a beta reader and a sensitivity reader. I beta read for Kimberly Jones and Gilly Siegel's novel, I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. They thanked me in the credits, which is very sweet. And they're also, in upcoming craft chats. So you'll be hearing from them. If you haven't already heard from them, check out the episode. Gilly is in episode 1, and Kim is in an upcoming episode 2. Not episode 2, but an upcoming episode as well, I should say. And I forgot to mention in my earlier recording that I also did a lot of internships and mentorships, any way that I could learn more about writing, about publishing, and, try to network and make connections. So I was doing the Writers House mentorship program, Writers House Literary Agency. I did their mentorship program briefly. I did the Tessera editorial mentorship. I did the Breakthrough Writers Boot Camp. Kate Brawning, an editor, gave me a scholarship for that program. She liked my work, and I did that program as well. And all of these different programs, from Drexel's programming to these mentorships and internships, just help enrich me and help me grow as a writer, along with reading books on craft and watching every video and thing I could see. And again, that's why I do Craft Chat, because I want to share the knowledge that helped me get where I am. And now I will continue with my story. Thanks. I've been a judge for Writer's Digest, for the Writer's Digest annual competition a couple of years in a row. So for a couple of years I've done that. I just worked all kind of jobs in the literary sphere now. And my book is coming out. One is coming out 2025, the Heart's Gambit book. And again, that name might change. We'll find out. If it does, I'll let you know. And I have another book coming out in 2026. And so far, the debut process has been exciting. A lot of writing and revision. We haven't really announced yet. And I'm saying this and giving the deets on the book on video now because it'll already be announced by the time this video launches. But right now, it's still secret. So you're sharing a secret with me. But yeah, so that was how my journey began. Again, always loved craft. Once I discovered it, I fell madly in love with it, and I just wanted to keep learning about writing, practicing writing, and sharing the love of writing and literacy with others, which is what led me to doing the craft chats for Drexel. Like I said, I'm co-chair of the Drexel MFA alumni. And as one of the presidents of the Alumni Association, I wanted to share the love of craft with the alumni and current students at Drexel, which I do. A lot of the interviews you'll see on here are interviews that are taped with Drexel students in the audience, and them students and alumni, and them asking authors questions. Some of them are just separate from separate author interviews I do, but since most of my writing for Writer's Digest and stuff centers around craft, I kind of wanted to have a hub of craft knowledge so that all of you can learn and benefit and enjoy the industry insights and the publishing professionals talking about publishing and craft and what's hot. Maybe it'll help you reach your journey in becoming a published author faster than me, because when I got started, I didn't really clearly understand craft. I didn't clearly understand genres. I didn't clearly understand what was hot. And, that made my process take a little longer because you have to account for that learning curve. So hopefully Craft Chat Chronicles will help you guys get all that stuff learned so that you can reach your dream and reach the goal of becoming a published writer and perhaps even a best-selling novelist sooner. So that's why I started Craft Chat. That's who I am. And that was my writing journey. Through the interviewing, I met Donnell Clayton, actually, and she owns Cake Creative and Electric Postcard. And as I was interviewing her and we were talking about her company, she was talking about how she hires writers and this, that, the third. So then I was just like, hey, in an interview, shoot my shot. So I did. And I basically, told her I write. And she was like, oh, I'm curious. I asked her if I could send her some. She said she was curious to read it. I sent it to her. She called me back. She's like, I love it. I want to work with you. And the next thing I know, I'm signing to Susie Townsend at New Leaf Literary to represent the book. And I'm off to the races. So, it's an IP project. I will do another video at some point talking more in detail into how IP works and all that good stuff. But like I said, so that was how, and it all really connected, and it all really started with that bad book. So I guess I can't hate the bad book, because had I not done that horrible book and tried to put it out in the universe, I never would have started doing author interviews. I never would have had the interview with the person who, started the wheels motion to getting my dreams of becoming a traditionally published author to come to life. And so I guess in that way, every step is a needed step. Every part of our journey is an important part. But that's my story. Like and subscribe if you enjoy this. I appreciate you guys listening to Craft Chat Chronicles. I also intend to have a lot of other 2025 debut authors who will be coming out around the time as me on to talk to you about debut year and their experiences in their publishing journey, and share some knowledge of craft that helped them get their book deals. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you, and I hope you enjoy it. Hope you learn a lot from it. I'll chat with you again soon. Bye.
That wraps up today's Craft Chat Chronicles with JD Mayo. Thanks for joining us. If you liked the episode, please comment, subscribe, and share. For show notes, writing workshops, and tips, head to jdmayo.com. That's jdmayo.com. While you're there, join JD's mailing list for updates, giveaways, and more.